What's up, you guys? Welcome back to another Commander Deck Tech video. This is a deck by From the Shire called Dungeon Diving, a Adventure in the Forgotten Realms commander. I always get that title wrong. I don't know. It's just so difficult for me to remember Adventure in the Forgotten Realm just because it seems so long, so unnecessary of a title. It could have condensed that and made it easier to remember. But I don't know. It's probably because I haven't really focused on the set that much. And again, if you want to take a look at these decks whenever I do a deck tech video, I will have them linked in the description below. So if you want to see this exact same page, click on that Moxfield link. So we have here Sefris of the Hidden Ways, 3 mana Esper Human Wizard, a 2/3. Whenever one or more creature cards are put into your graveyard from anywhere, venture into the dungeon. This ability triggers only once each turn. Now I'll try to put up an image here of all 3 of the dungeons that you can choose from. But this is a really cool ability because you do have flexibility. You can choose which dungeons you want to enter, and because this triggers whenever one or more creature cards are put into your graveyard, doesn't specify from the battlefield. You can mill yourself, you can do some self-mill, you can discard to do that on your opponent's turns, making that so much easier to get through the dungeon. And the ability Create Undead, whenever you complete a dungeon, return target creature card from your graveyard to the battlefield. So that's going to be really cool. And starting it off here with the creatures, we have the newer Esper Sentinel from Modern Horizons 2. Great card draw, especially if you can find a way to make the power greater. Even if you don't, you have a way in white here to get some extra card draw. We have Baleful Strix to draw a card. Merfolk Looter. You're going to want some looter cards in here where you get to draw and discard because that's going to trigger our commander on our opponent's turns. We have the Phantasmal Image, great reprint that came in this pre-con deck, so you don't really have to remove it, you can leave it in here if you're looking to upgrade. We have Triumphant Adventurer. This did not come in the main deck. As long as it's your turn, he has first strike, and whenever he attacks, venture into the dungeon. So you get another way to trigger that, get through your dungeons a little bit quicker. And we have Wall of Omens to draw a card when it enters. We have Yuan-Ti Malison, another one from the Dungeons & Dragons set that did not come in this pre-con. Can't be blocked as long as it's attacking alone, and whenever it deals combat damage to a player, venture into the dungeon. So another trigger for that dungeon. We have Burnished Heart to get some more lands. Doomed Necromancer is great. Any kind of graveyard strategy that's playing black, if you can constantly bring back creatures like this, it's going to make it easier to trigger everything else. And we have Hama Pashar, Ruin Seeker. So room abilities of dungeons you own trigger an additional time. So when you're going through each dungeon, you're going into the next room, you trigger an ability, she's going to give you an extra trigger. And then we have Nidar, Selfless Paladin, another one from the set that did not come in this precon. Whenever the Selfless Paladin enters the battlefield or attacks, you venture into the dungeon. And other creatures you control get +1/+1 as long as you've completed a dungeon. We have Nimble Obstructionist. Cycling's another great way that you can trigger this kind of commander because you put a creature in the graveyard when you cycle. Also great because you get to counter a target activated or triggered ability when you cycle it. We have Obsessive Stitcher, another looter creature. We draw a card and then discard a card. We have Plague Crafter, a nice creature to bring back if we need to deal with Voltron decks. Forcing each player to sacrifice a creature or even discard if they don't have any creatures is still pretty good. We have Barrowin of Clan Undur, a lot of good cards from the main set that interact with the dungeon mechanic that don't come in the precon. That's my only complaint about it, but other than that, it's still a pretty good deck. When Barrowin enters, you venture into the dungeon, and whenever Barrowin of Clan Undur attacks, return up to 1 creature card with mana value 3 or less from your graveyard to the battlefield if you've completed a dungeon. We got ourselves a Midnight Pathlighter. Creatures you control can't be blocked except by legendary creatures, and whenever one or more creatures you control deals combat damage to a player, venture into the dungeon. And we have Auric Lore Mage, kind of in a tomb on an activated ability. So if you can leave this out there for a while, you can just keep tapping the Lore Mage, keep getting cards into your graveyard. You will trigger Sefris that way too. And it could be something really powerful later on. You're going to see some pretty cool cards here. We have Sakashima of 1,000 Faces, along with the older Sakashima, the Imposter. And I guess when we read the primer, we're going to figure out exactly why these are important, but it must be a cool reason. We have Solemn Simulacrum, great creature all around for value, comes in the precon. Spark Double, another way that you can copy a creature that also happens to be a legendary. So if you wanted to copy your commander, this is a cool way of doing it. We have Cloud Blazer. When it enters, you gain 2 life and draw 2 cards. Doom Whisperer, another way you can self-mill, get that trigger off of Sefris. Just a great value creature anyway. We have Karmic Guide. Good for bringing back creatures from our graveyard. We have Muldrifter. Evoke makes it easy for us to get it into play. We draw 2, hits our graveyard, triggers Sefris. We might be able to get it back later on. We have Shriekmaw. Same exact idea, you can evoke it, but it enters and destroys a non-artifact, non-black creature. We have Sir Conrad, because that ability, believe it or not, that activated ability of 2 mana, have each player mill a card, could be useful for Sefris if you need to trigger it. But outside of that, great trigger, you can deal a ton of damage to each opponent. We have Radiant Solar. Whenever Radiant Solar or another non-token creature enters the battlefield under your control, you venture into the dungeon. Great trigger, gonna help us speed up our commander. We can pay 1 mana and discard Radiant Solar to venture into the dungeon and gain 3 life. So it's almost like a cycling benefit. We have Sun Titan to get back some creatures from our graveyard or just any permanent card, convert a mana cost 3 or less. We have Sunblast Angel, enters and destroys all tapped creatures. We have Sheoldred, which is an all-star in any kind of graveyard deck. Not only will she allow you to bring back creatures from your graveyard on your upkeep, but she'll also force each opponent to sack a creature at the beginning of theirs. And we have Ashen Rider. Whenever it enters the battlefield or dies, you exile target permanent. So a nightmare card to have to deal with if you can constantly kill it and bring it back. You're gonna get a ton of triggers. In sorceries, you have Reanimate to bring back a creature from the graveyard. You lose life equal to its mana cost. We have Damn. 2 mana, you can destroy a creature, can't be regenerated. You can overload it for 4 mana, and it's basically a Wrath of God. We have Demonic Tutor to search for anything. We have Agadeem's Awakening. Return from your graveyard to the battlefield any number of target creature cards that each have a different converted mana cost, X or less. We have Victimize, probably one of my favorite reanimation spells, because sacrificing a creature to bring back 2 creatures from your graveyard is ridiculous. And if this were a rare, if this were a reserve list card, you know it would be like $300. And then we have Damnation, it's Black Wrath of God, Rite of Replication. Pretty cool way of triggering Sefris, I guess, because if you take advantage of the legend rule and they're all hitting the graveyard, technically tokens do hit the graveyard when they die. You'll be able to venture through the dungeon several times. I don't even know how many triggers total. The more venture into the dungeon triggers that you get, the quicker this deck is going to work. And then we have Supreme Verdict, destroy all creatures, can't be countered, Burial Rites, return target creature card from your graveyard to the battlefield, has flashback, Necromantic Selection, destroy all creatures, then return a creature card put into a graveyard this way to the battlefield under your control. It's a black zombie in addition to its other colors and types. For instance, we have Entomb, just a good graveyard search card. Put whatever card you want in your graveyard. Swords to Plowshares, Vampiric Tutor, another search card. Counterspell, Dispark, for exiling removal with Anguished Unmaking, Teferi's Protection to protect our board, Utter End for more exile removal, and Force of Will, because why not make this a little bit more competitive? Artifacts, we have Mana Crypt, Soul Ring, Wayfarer's Bauble, Arcane Signet, Felwar Stone, Lightning Greaves for protection, Strionic Resonator to copy the dungeon triggers, I'm assuming, and then we have Dungeon Map to make it easier to get through the dungeon. And enchantments, we have Tortured Existence, we can pay a black, choose and discard a creature card, return target card from our graveyard to our hand. This is easy to trigger Sefris with because you could just do it on the same creature card. If you only have one other creature in your graveyard, it really just comes down to how much black mana do you have, because you can just keep triggering Sefris on your opponent's turns. Since you can only trigger that once a turn, I guess you're just doing this on each opponent's turn, which is still pretty good. Propaganda to keep them from attacking us, and Rhystic Study to draw some cards. And the lands, you do have a Cabal Coffers in here, along with the Urborg Tomb of Yawgmoth, so you get that little interaction, that combo. You get Bojuka Bog to deal with a graveyard, you get Field of the Dead to get some zombie tokens, you get some high market action in here to sacrifice a creature, gain some life, and Gaia Reach Sanitarium to draw and discard so we get to trigger Sefris. The rest just looks like your typical mana fixing in these colors. But anyway, let me know what you think about Sefris of the Hidden Ways. Again, if you want to check out the full deck list, go on moxfield.com. This is by From the Shire. It's called Dungeon Diving. So you have a wonderful day. Void here signing off. I will see you next time.